Join me as I spend a night in this supposedly haunted hotel to find out if it's really a bad idea. The hotel I'll be discussing tonight is the infamous Bellwood Hotel, a place notorious for its dark history and paranormal activity. Located in the heart of rural America, this hotel has been a hotbed of ghostly legends and spooky tales that'll make your skin crawl. Is staying overnight at this haunted hotel a risky or thrilling experience? That's the central question I'll be exploring tonight. Some say it's a recipe for disaster, while others claim it's the ultimate adrenaline rush. But before we dive into the meat of the matter, let's set the tone. I'll be sharing some truly terrifying accounts from previous visitors, and you might just find yourself questioning my sanity for taking on this challenge. Imagine being in a hotel room, surrounded by darkness, and hearing strange noises that'll make you wonder if you're truly alone. It's an experience that'll push your courage to the limit, and I'm not sure if I'm ready for it myself. But that's exactly what I'll be doing tonight, and I'll be sharing every single detail with you. So if you're ready to embark on this spine-tingling journey with me, then let's get started. But if you're easily spooked, you might want to click away. This hotel has a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in the country. The Bellwood Hotel's history is steeped in tragedy and mystery. Built in the late 1800s, it was once a popular destination for travelers seeking rest and relaxation. However, a series of gruesome events, including a devastating fire and multiple fatalities, has left an indelible mark on the hotel's psyche. Guests have reported seeing ghostly apparitions, hearing disembodied voices, and experiencing inexplicable phenomena that'll make you question the fabric of reality. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a couple who stayed in room 314. They reported seeing a shadowy figure lurking in the corner of their room, which was accompanied by an intense feeling of dread. When they tried to leave, they found that their door was mysteriously locked, trapping them inside. Another guest claims to have seen the ghost of a young girl dressed in a white gown, walking down the hotel's corridors. The hotel's staff has also reported strange occurrences, including finding objects moved from their usual places and hearing strange noises coming from the hotel's abandoned wing. Some even claim to have seen the ghost of the hotel's former owner, who died under mysterious circumstances. But what's most unsettling is the sheer number of unexplained events that have occurred within these walls. Doors slamming shut, lights flickering, and disembodied whispers. It's enough to make you wonder if the hotel is indeed a portal to the other side. As I sit here in my hotel room, I can feel the weight of the hotel's history bearing down on me. The air is thick with anticipation, and I'm not sure what the night will bring. But I do know one thing: I'm in for a wild ride. The night I spent at the Bellwood Hotel was truly unforgettable. I experienced things that I can hardly put into words, and I'm still trying to process the sheer terror that I felt. But as I sit here, reflecting on my experience, I'm left with more questions than answers. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? Is staying overnight at the Bellwood Hotel a bad idea? Well, that's for you to decide. But if you do decide to take on the challenge, make sure you're prepared for the unexpected. Thanks for joining me on this haunted adventure, and I hope you'll share your own ghost stories in the comments below. And if you're feeling brave, be sure to check out my next video, where I'll be exploring another haunted location that'll make your skin crawl. Part 1. Arriving at Bellwood. The Bellwood Hotel didn't look imposing on arrival. Its grand Victorian architecture, surrounded by a veil of mist, stood against the eerie quiet of the rural town. I arrived around dusk, the sky a dim blue-gray, threatening rain. The locals at the town's one cafe threw cautious glances my way. When I mentioned my plans to stay at Bellwood for the night, most offered clipped warnings, a quick shake of the head, as if talking about the hotel too long was dangerous in itself. I dismissed their superstitions. After all, people have always been drawn to rumors and tales of tragedy. But when I reached the hotel, its looming presence unnerved me. The Bellwood's faded letters, hanging off the main entrance in crooked alignment, seemed to echo a silent invitation, one that sent an involuntary shiver through my spine. Once inside, the dark mahogany-paneled walls, dimly lit chandeliers, and flickering candle sconces only added to the uncanny feeling that settled over me. An elderly woman sat behind the reception desk, her gaze fixed somewhere above my shoulder. as if she were staring at something only she could see. When I cleared my throat, her gaze shifted, and without a word, she slid a heavy, iron key toward me with the number 314 engraved on it. "Room 314? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded. "Don't leave after midnight," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And if you hear knocking, don't open the door." It felt like a line straight out of a campfire story. I laughed awkwardly, but the woman's unblinking stare told me she wasn't joking. With a tight smile, I took the key and headed to the stairs, her warning looping in my mind as I made my way to my room. The hallway stretched out in both directions like an endless tunnel. The air felt thick, charged with a damp, musty smell. I reached my room, unlocked the door, and stepped inside, greeted by cold air and a strange heaviness, almost as if the room were pushing me back. The decor was simple, though with an unsettling edge. Old portraits with empty-eyed figures stared from the walls, and the bed's headboard was scuffed, as though clawed at by previous occupants. I checked my watch. 11:45 p.m. I made myself comfortable, or at least tried to, fully aware that the night was just beginning. Part 2. The Midnight Murmurs. The hotel was as quiet as a tomb. The occasional creak from the floorboards and soft hum of the pipes made the silence almost unbearable. I lay in bed, trying to convince myself that the stories were just that, stories. But that resolve didn't last long. At precisely midnight, I heard it. A faint knock echoed from somewhere down the hall. It started slowly, in a rhythmic, almost hypnotic pattern. Knock, 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 like a heartbeat, pulsing through the wood and wallpaper. I sat up, holding my breath, straining to catch any other sounds. Another knock, louder this time, and it seemed to be coming from right outside my door. The air in my room grew colder, thick with an almost suffocating stillness. I remembered the receptionist's words, "If you hear knocking, don't open the door." I reached over to lock the door, half hoping it had been secured before I even entered. But my fingers found only an empty latch. It was broken. The knock came again, stronger, now accompanied by a low, raspy murmur, too muffled to make out. I inched closer to the door, listening. The voice whispered something incomprehensible, almost like it was underwater. I couldn't resist pressing my ear against the wood, trying to make sense of the words. That was when I felt a presence, standing just on the other side. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, my skin crawling with an intense urge to back away. Whoever or whatever was there seemed to be breathing in sync with me. I could almost feel their breath radiating through the door, the faint smell of damp earth and something metallic, like rust. "Let me in," the voice finally whispered, a sound so low it seemed to crawl directly into my ears. I jerked back, heart racing. The whispering stopped, but the silence was worse somehow, weighted and unnatural. My eyes darted around the room. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch me, their empty stares boring into my skull. I tried to calm myself, reasoning that it was just my imagination. But then I noticed the bedded sheets had been neatly tucked when I entered, but now, the covers were rumpled as if someone had been lying beside me all along. Another knock, closer this time, but it hadn't come from the door. It was coming from the wall, right next to my head. I froze, paralyzed by the overwhelming sense that something inhuman was trying to break through, its cold energy vibrating through the thin plaster. I wanted to scream, but it was as though something held my voice, swallowing it in my throat. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the knocking stopped. The room fell into silence once more. At that moment, I realized something chilling. I could see my breath. Part 3. The shadow in the hallway. The seconds dragged into minutes, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door. My breath misted in the cold air, swirling slowly, defying the stillness in the room. I forced myself to look around, every shadow now seeming more sinister, every dark corner a potential hiding place. Just then, footsteps creaked down the hallway. They were faint at first, as if someone were walking carefully, deliberately. The sound grew louder, the slow, echoing steps moving closer. They stopped right outside my door. I inched to the door, peering through the peephole, my heart hammering in my chest. But as my eye met the glass, I could barely make anything out. The hallway was cloaked in darkness. The bulb above my door flickered once, then went out completely. Panic clawed at me. I wasn't just blind to whatever was out there. I was alone in complete darkness. My only guide the memory of those ominous knocks and whispers. The silence returned, thicker than before. I waited, hardly daring to breathe. Suddenly, there was a soft scraping sound of faint scratching, like nails raking slowly against the other side of the door. It traced back and forth, as though something or someone was tracing their fingers along the wood. And then it spoke again. "Let me in." The voice was soft, barely a whisper, as if it came from just inches beyond the door. This time, however, the voice sounded familiar, almost like my own. I backed away, unable to stop myself from glancing over at the bed. That eerie sense of movement from earlier returned. The sheets shifted, settling into the deep indentation of an invisible figure. But this time, there was something more. A faint, human outline pressed against the sheets, like a body lying perfectly still. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to scream. Instead, I stumbled backward until I hit the wall, every inch of my body tingling with fear. My eyes darted back to the door, and my heart lurched in terror. The doorknob was turning slowly, quietly, as if someone were testing to see if it was locked. Then came a single, chilling click as the knob released, and the door slowly began to open. I braced myself, heart racing, expecting some monstrous figure to step into the room. But instead, the door swung open, revealing only the dark, empty hallway beyond. Against my better judgment, I stepped forward, cautiously peering out. The hall was drenched in shadows, but something at the end of it caught my eye. A figure stood just at the edge of the dim light cast by the lone window at the far end. They wore an old-fashioned, formal suit, though their face was shrouded in darkness. A strange, dreadful impulse overcame me. I wanted to walk down the hall, to get closer to that figure, to see who or what they were. But the moment I took a step forward, they moved, disappearing around the corner in an instant, as if vanishing into thin air. I was about to turn back into my room, to shut myself in. But then I heard the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter. It was faint, echoing through the halls, distorted and strange, like it was playing backward. It seemed to come from the very end of the hallway, from the place where that figure had just been. Without thinking, I whispered, "Hello," silence. And then, faintly, came the reply, "Come play with us." The voice was eerily childlike, but it carried an undercurrent of something dark, something wrong. I didn't answer. Instead, I slowly retreated back into my room, closing the door firmly behind me. But the laughter didn't stop, it only grew louder, as though it was coming from inside the walls, reverberating around me, until I felt my skin crawl with its sickening familiarity. In the darkness of the Bellwood Hotel, I realized I wasn't alone, and that whatever was here had been waiting for me all along. Part 4. The visitor at 314 ***. The laughter faded, and I sank to the floor, clutching the edges of my jacket to keep my hands from shaking. My phone's screen flickered as I pressed the button to check the time. It was 3:13 a.m. I braced myself, half expecting another knock, another whisper. And then, exactly at 3:14, a loud banging erupted on the door, shattering the silence and sending a chill straight through my spine. "Let me in," the voice demanded again, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was louder, angrier, with a hint of something I couldn't place, a mix of frustration and desperation. And worst of all, the voice sounded achingly familiar, like a distorted, darker version of my own. "Go away," I whispered, pressing myself against the door, my voice barely audible, barely holding steady. Silence returned, but the thick, unnatural chill in the room didn't lift. Then I heard it again whispering, just on the other side of the door. It was speaking to itself, muttering in a frantic, restless tone. I couldn't make out the words, but the voice sounded familiar. Not just like my own voice, but like an echo from a long-buried memory. A sensation I couldn't shake began to form in the back of my mind. An unsettling feeling that I was hearing fragments of my own thoughts from years ago. Words I had said in fear or anger, lost to time, now resurrected in these strange murmurs. My body went numb, and I could feel my heartbeat drumming through my veins. A light flickered in the corner of the room, illuminating a figure in the mirror above the dresser. I turned slowly, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. In the reflection, I saw my own face, But something was wrong. My reflection was smiling a twisted, menacing grin that I hadn't formed. I was frozen, staring as the figure tilted its head in a grotesque mimicry of curiosity. Then it raised a hand, mirroring mine, except I hadn't moved. The fingers in the reflection twisted into a wave, as though beckoning me closer. "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. I backed away from the mirror, but the figure stepped forward, its movements stilted and unnatural, as if something was forcing it to imitate me. I turned to the door, desperate to leave the room, but before I could reach it, the mirror figure spoke. "You can't leave, not yet." The voice was my own, but filled with a strange malice, echoing through the room, as though the walls themselves had absorbed my words and were now repeating them back to me. The mirror's glass began to ripple, distorting my reflection until it looked like someone else entirely, a stranger with hollow eyes, staring straight through me. A low hum filled the air, like 1,000 muffled whispers, all building up to a crescendo. I felt as though I were suffocating under the weight of those voices, like they were trying to seep into my mind, filling it with fractured memories that weren't mine. The voices grew louder, and I could make out fragments. "Come home. Join us. Let us in." I gritted my teeth, trying to block out the relentless cacophony, but then one voice rose above the others, clear and sharp. "We've been waiting for you." The door creaked open behind me, a cold draft brushing against my neck. I wanted to turn, to run, but I felt rooted in place, my body betraying me. The darkness in the hall seemed to stretch toward me, long tendrils of shadow curling around the edge of the doorway. "Come closer," the voices beckoned, each word dripping with malice. I closed my eyes, shaking my head, whispering a desperate plea. "Please, leave me alone." But my own voice answered back, its tone mocking, dripping with bitter amusement. "You came to us, remember? You wanted this." The words stabbed into me, each syllable tinged with regret and an emotion I couldn't place, an eerie familiarity. Like I'd heard this voice in my own head 1,000 times before, calling out from somewhere far beyond my control. Just then, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, gripping with a strength that stole my breath. My eyes shot open, and in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim, flickering light, stood the shadowy figure from the hallway, its empty eyes watching me. As I stared, paralyzed, it leaned in, whispering in a voice barely more than a breath. "Welcome back. Part 5. The return. The figure's words echoed in my mind, "Welcome back." I felt a surge of memories that weren't mine flash through my mind. Moments of terror, of panic, all centered around the same dark hallway. The same hollow faces watching from the shadows. My legs buckled, but the cold grip on my shoulder held me upright, as though it intended to ensure I didn't leave before I fully understood. "Who are you?" I whispered, voice trembling. The figure leaned closer, bringing the stinging scent of earth and decay. "You don't remember?" It cocked its head, a gleeful spark in its empty eyes. "But you've been here before. In fact, you never truly left." In a daze, I stumbled backward, breaking free from the cold grip. My body felt heavier with each step, as though the air itself were trying to keep me in the room. I glanced around, desperate to find anything familiar, anything to prove that this was just some twisted nightmare. But everything felt wrong. The portraits on the walls now seemed more distorted, their eyes bleeding dark shadows that spilled down their faces. I blinked hard, but the vision didn't go away. The images only grew clearer, sharper, like the walls themselves were alive and pulsing with dark memories. The figure stood in the doorway, blocking my only exit. I turned back toward the mirror, desperate for an escape. In its cracked surface, I didn't see myself but a ghostly woman in an old-fashioned white dress, eyes wide and pleading, her mouth moving in silent words. I moved closer, squinting to make out her lips. "Help me," she mouthed, reaching out as if she could pull me through the glass and into her nightmare. Her hand touched the inside of the mirror, and I reached out reflexively. The second our hands met, cold shot through me, an icy, bone-deep chill that seemed to seep into my veins. For a brief moment, I felt myself pulled, almost against my will, deeper into her world. Suddenly, the figure in the mirror disappeared, and I was staring into an endless black void. "Welcome back," the hollow voice echoed again, as if it were coming from all directions, surrounding me, pulling me closer. I staggered back, breaking contact with the mirror, and gasped for air. When I looked around, I wasn't in room 314 anymore. The surroundings had changed, replaced by a vast, dark expanse with walls that seemed to stretch into infinity, each one lined with doors identical to the one in my room. And from each door came muffled voices, desperate, whispering voices. I was in the hotel still, but it wasn't the Bellwood Hotel I had entered. This was something else, a place that felt ancient, older than the walls themselves. I turned, seeing shadowy figures drifting in and out of the rooms, each door they touched closing with a soft, sinister click. My heart raced as I moved forward, each step heavy and uncertain. The voices grew louder, a chorus of agony and regret. Then I heard it again, my own voice, from behind one of the doors. Fighting every instinct to turn and run, I reached for the handle and pulled it open. Inside was my room, not the version I'd left, but one that felt impossibly old, as if it had been preserved in time. Dust coated the furniture, and spiderwebs stretched across the walls. But in the bed, under the thin, tattered sheets, I saw a figure. A woman lying perfectly still, her hands folded across her chest. I took a cautious step closer, but froze when I realized she was me. Or, at least, some version of me. Her face was pale, almost translucent, with dark hollows under her eyes, her mouth frozen in a silent scream. I wanted to run, to scream, but something compelled me to lean in, my own shadow falling over her face. Her eyes snapped open. She sat up, moving with a speed and sharpness that defied reason, and gripped my arm with a force that felt like fire. Her face twisted, mouth opening, but no sound came out, only a rush of freezing air that left me gasping for breath. In a panic, I yanked my arm away and stumbled back. But as I did, the room began to dissolve, the walls, the bed, even the twisted reflection of myself fading into darkness. I blinked, and suddenly, I was back in the hallway of the Bellwood Hotel, facing the door to room 314. My hand was still on the doorknob. I felt disoriented, like I had just woken from a dream. And yet the icy handprint on my arm reminded me it was all too real. The hallway was silent, eerily so, and the figure was nowhere to be seen. I took a deep, shuddering breath, steeling myself, and turned the handle to my room. The room was exactly as I'd left it. The bed, the dresser, even my phone on the bedside table all untouched. But as I looked closer, I noticed something chilling. On the bed, where I had been lying, the covers were turned back, as if someone had been lying beside me, as if something had been waiting for me all along. I backed toward the door, my heart hammering, and in a panicked rush, I fled down the hall. As I passed the reception desk, the old woman glanced up, her expression solemn, almost pitying. "Leaving so soon?" she asked, as if she had expected it. I nodded, unable to speak, my voice trapped somewhere in my throat. She offered a faint smile, her eyes distant and dark. "Once you leave," she said softly, "you'll never really be gone." I stumbled out of the Bellwood Hotel into the cold morning light, barely able to breathe, my mind reeling. When I looked back, the hotel loomed in silence, its faded sign swaying in the wind, its windows dark and unwelcoming. The receptionist's words haunted me long after I left, and even now, I sometimes feel a chill in the air, an echo of those voices calling out to me from the walls, whispering from the edges of my memory, as if the Bellwood Hotel was still there, just waiting for me to come back.